Díth da. For the first video, we'll be covering the earliest period of the Stone Age, known as the Paleolithic. This period overview, as well as the next one called the Mesolithic, will likely be comparatively shorter videos than future periods, and I probably won't delve further into them beyond these overviews, either. Now that's because information on what occurred in Kurnow during these eras is incredibly limited and largely conjecture. But I digress. Let's get started. So, I'll be covering, broadly, the Middle and Upper Paleolithic, which roughly covers about 250 to 10,000 years ago. I won't be delving into the Lower Paleolithic, due to it being too long ago, and with next to no evidence in Kurnow for human and hominin activity. Now, as a quick overview, the island of Great Britain during this period was still very much connected to the European continent. The National Geographic, along with experts and projects studying the prehistoric landscape of British coastlines and Doggerland, produced this map of the submerging of British coasts during the Upper Paleolithic and early Mesolithic periods. Now, as you can see, there was a drastic sinking of land between 16,000 and 8,000 years ago, which suddenly puts Kurnow's position into perspective, and actually lays out exactly how small the remaining slither of land at the southwestern end of Great Britain really is today, and how far apart the modern and Paleolithic coastlines really are. In terms of who populated Britain and when, due to inhospitable cold and glacial maximums, there is generally considered to be no human occupation of Britain, and thus Kurnow, from about 180 to 60,000 years ago. Homo neanderthalensis, or Neanderthals as most would know them today, occupied Britain both before this period and slightly after, and Homo sapiens, or modern humans, occupied Britain from about 40,000 years ago onwards. And during this period there was no farming. It was purely hunter-gatherer societies, often migrating between highlands and lowlands during different seasons. So, there is comparatively little evidence for human activity and occupation in Kurnow during these periods, and this is even when comparing us to both Britain at large and the southwest of England more specifically. Now there are two main theories as to why this might be, but first let's have a quick look at roughly what has been found. So in Kurnow we have a small number of Paleolithic tools which have been found sporadically across the 20th and 21st centuries, which are largely limited to southern and northern Kurnow. These finds are fairly typical Paleolithic tools and would often be thrown away when no longer needed by the individual who made them. Examples are this hand axe found in a St. Berrien farm, and another similar near Constantine. And then this hand axe as well, found in the Portable Antiquities Scheme database from an undisclosed location in Kurnow. Another example is what's known as a penknife point, and actually the interesting thing about this is that it was found in an old collection of the Royal Cornwall Museum, and originally from somewhere on the Isles of Scilly, which is at the very tip of Kurnow, and dated to actually after that landmass became a small archipelago separated from Kurnow. So, you might be wondering, well, clearly there have been finds from the period, so surely that's proof of human occupation. Not quite, sadly. It has to be remembered that these tools cover a huge period of time, every individual discovery representing a single event during a period of around 250,000 years. So they can't, by themselves, be indicative of wider consistent activity and occupation. But what they do say is they at least tell a story of at some point there was someone, somewhere in Kurnow. Furthermore, we know, thanks to William Pengelly, a Cornish geoscientist and one of the fathers of prehistoric archaeology, through his work at sites in Devon like Kents and Brixham Caves, that Paleolithic peoples, modern humans specifically, occupied caves in southern Devon, though it's hard to say whether that trend would continue into Kurnow. These South Devon caves are situated along and near the major Palea Channel, or Palea River, featured in the National Geographic map from earlier. A modern human jawbone was found with a carbon-14 date of about 40,000 years ago, and animal bones found around the jaw were also dated to between 41.5 and 44,000 years ago. It's worth mentioning though that these dates are highly contested, and all that we can say broadly is that there was modern human Paleolithic occupation in South Devon caves, and that no similar evidence for occupation has been discovered in Curnow, but it must be remembered, as discussed earlier, that the coastline has changed a lot since those Paleolithic days. Which brings us to the two theories on why Kernowic evidence for Paleolithic activity is limited. Firstly, it may simply be that activity in Curnow was sporadic at best, and we were largely uninhabited during this period, that being on the very fringe of northwestern Europe meant not too many humans were active in the area. After all, the globe was too large and hominin populations too small to consistently occupy every region during the Paleolithic. Perhaps Curnow is on the list of the unpopulated. It is, after all, a relatively small landmass. Put simply, this theory ascribes to the idea that there is no real evidence to find, and that Curnow was largely unoccupied during the entire Paleolithic. However, this begs the question of why is there concrete evidence for consistent activity and occupation in nearby Devon, but not Curnow? It's hardly like those Neanderthals and Homo sapiens would respect present-day borders. This becomes a bigger question when we know that there must have been at least some humans living nearby at several points during the Paleolithic to have deposited the small number of artefacts found in Curnow. So this leads us to the second theory in two parts. Firstly, that the common acidic moor soils found in Curnow don't really allow for great preservation of evidence. And secondly, that what evidence may have survived is now underwater and has suffered under tidal erosion, as the old Kernowic coastline is estimated, in certain parts, to be many miles further out than it is today, once again further detailed in that earlier map. Now this sea level change is especially important if we consider that occupation in Devon was largely taking place in those caves and caverns, especially around the area of that Paleo channel. One might surmise the same could be true for Curnow, and in the same map we've been using, there is another Paleo channel detailed in northern Curnow, though the majority of it, unlike the Devon one, now lies underwater. Thus, many of those caves would now be submerged, and that would make gathering evidence for any occupation difficult at best. However, there are a lot of assumptions with this theory, and there is often a tendency to ascribe to theories that we want to be true, especially when looking at smaller regions and detailing culturally significant history, where one wants to expand upon a smaller culture's past, like we are now. And there we have it. Unfortunately, that's all we currently know about Curnow during the Paleolithic, and it's mostly a lot of questions and shroud of mystery. You know, I could give you an exact list of every single Paleolithic find from Curnow, but they all tell us pretty much the same thing I have told you, which is not much. So there wouldn't really be a point of doing that, and instead I thought it would be better just to give this generic overview with a couple of specific examples. Now, we don't see clear and concrete habitation until the Mesolithic period, which we'll get into in the next video. But what do you think? Do you think it's likely that Curnow was largely uninhabited during the Paleolithic, simply for being a small surviving strip of land too far away on what were the northwestern fringes of Europe? Or do you think that Curnow was more in line with Devon, and the evidence has simply been flooded, or perhaps is yet to be found? Still out there somewhere, and ready to change our entire knowledge of early Kernowic history? Whatever the case, I hope you enjoyed this video, and Thar Wellus.